A single cannon, fired once, could kill more men than a musket volley from an entire company of soldiers. Not because it was aimed at them, because of what happened to the ship around them. When a 32-pound iron ball hit a wooden hull at close range, the ball itself rarely killed anyone. It was the wood. A cannonball traveling at over 1,000 feet per second didn't punch a clean hole. It turned an entire section of oak planking into a cloud of daggers. Men were killed by their own ship. That is the weapon we're talking about today. Not a sword, not a musket, a machine of cast iron, rope, and gunpowder that took 300 years to perfect, and that decided more than any general or admiral who ruled the sea. By the end of this video, you'll understand why building a cannon was more dangerous than firing one, why a boring machine built for weapons accidentally launched the Industrial Revolution, and how 14 men could turn 3.5 tons of iron into a killing machine and reload it in 90 seconds. For most of the Age of Sail, a warship was not really a gun platform in the way we imagine today. Before the 1500s, ships carried soldiers, not artillery. Naval battles looked like street fights on water. Vessels rammed each other, grappled, and men climbed aboard to fight hand to hand. Small cannons existed, mounted high on the bow and stern, but they were closer to noisemakers than weapons. Good for scattering men on an enemy deck before boarding, useless for sinking anything. Everything changed when someone realized the guns needed to move. Not up, where they made a ship dangerously top-heavy, but down, into the hull itself, through openings cut directly into the ship's sides. These openings, gun ports, turned the ship itself into the weapon. For the first time, you didn't need to board an enemy vessel to destroy it. You could stand off at a distance and tear it apart. That single architectural decision set the terms for the next 300 years of naval warfare. Whoever could cast the most reliable guns and mount the most of them on a hull strong enough to survive firing them ruled the ocean.
Here's the part shipbuilders didn't advertise. The cannon was often more dangerous to its own crew than to the enemy. Picture a gun deck below decks on a first-rate ship of the line, barely 5 feet of headroom, packed with men, sweating in near-total darkness except for the light leaking through the gun ports. A crew of 14 surrounds a single 32-pounder, nearly 3 tons of iron sitting on a wooden carriage, tied down with rope thick enough to anchor a smaller boat. Every one of those guns had been cast in a foundry, poured from molten iron at close to 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit, and cooled slowly in a mold packed with wet sand. And here is the terrifying part. Nobody, not the foundry master, not the Navy inspector, not the gun crew, could see inside that iron once it hardened. Iron cools unevenly. As it does, tiny pockets of trapped gas can form deep inside the barrel wall, invisible from the outside, undetectable by weight or appearance. A cannon with one of these hidden flaws could fire flawlessly for months. Then, without warning, on an ordinary day, during an ordinary drill, the barrel would simply come apart, killing or maiming everyone standing near it. Navies knew this, so before any cannon entered service, it was subjected to something called proof firing, loaded with a charge far heavier than it would ever fire in real combat, then fired deliberately to see if it survived. If it cracked or bulged, it failed, and it was melted down. If it survived, it was stamped and sent to sea, carrying the invisible risk with it for as long. For 200 years, foundries tried to fix this the same way, adjusting sand mixtures, pouring temperatures, cooling times, incremental improvements. The core problem, casting metal around a hollow center and hoping it cooled evenly, never went away. Then, in 1774, an English ironmaster named John Wilkinson, nicknamed Iron Mad Wilkinson by people who thought he'd taken his obsession with metal too far, changed the method entirely. Instead of casting a cannon hollow and hoping the inside came out clean, Wilkinson cast the barrel as a completely solid block of iron. No hollow core, no void to trap gas unevenly. Then, after it cooled, he drilled the bore straight through using a precision boring machine. A rotating cutting bar supported and centered at both ends, instead of wobbling from a single anchor point like earlier tools. The result, barrels with a bore that was actually uniform from end to end. Tighter tolerance between the ball and the barrel meant less wasted gunpowder gas escaping around the shot, better range, better accuracy, and far fewer hidden flaws waiting to explode. Here's the twist almost nobody expects. Wilkinson's cannon boring machine had a second life. James Watt had spent years trying to build a working steam engine, but couldn't find anyone capable of boring a cylinder precisely enough to stop steam leaking past the piston. Wilkinson adapted his cannon boring technology to bore Watt's cylinders instead. A machine built to make deadlier weapons ended up making the steam engine possible, and the steam engine powered the Industrial Revolution. The naval cannon didn't just win battles, it quietly built the machine age. Firing one of these guns was its own kind of engineering, an orography. A 32-pounder crew of 14 worked a fixed sequence, sponge the barrel to kill any smoldering embers, load the powder charge, ram it home, load the bowl, then haul 3.5 tons of...
All of this, 3 centuries of foundry failures, Wilkinson's boring machine, drilled crews working in 90-second cycles, collided in a single afternoon off the coast of Spain in October 1805. At Trafalgar, a British fleet of 27 ships faced a combined French and Spanish fleet of 33. Outnumbered on paper, Nelson broke every convention of naval tactics. Instead of forming a parallel line and trading broadsides at a distance, he drove his ships directly into the enemy formation, splitting it apart and forcing a brutal close-range fight. Exactly the kind of fight where faster, better-engineered British guns would win. When HMS Victory closed on the French flagship and cut across her stern at point-blank range, a single broadside from her lower gun deck tore through the length of the enemy ship in seconds. It wasn't dramatic tactics that decided the outcome. It was iron that didn't crack, crews that reloaded faster, and 300 years of foundry engineering finally paying off in one afternoon. By the end of the day, the combined fleet had lost 22 ships. The British lost none.
Within 50 years of Trafalgar, everything about naval warfare changed again. Rifled barrels, explosive shells, and finally, in 1859, the first ocean-going ironclad warship made the smoothbore cannon and the wooden hull obsolete almost overnight. But for 300 years, the fate of empires came down to something as small and invisible as a trapped air bubble cooling inside a block of iron. And the men brave or desperate enough to load it, aim it, and stand beside it anyway. If you want to see how the carronade, the gun sailors nicknamed the Smasher, nearly made the standard naval cannon obsolete on its own, that's next.
Almost none of the men who cast these guns, drilled these crews, or stood beside a barrel that might already be flawed ever had their names recorded anywhere. No monument lists the foundry worker who got the sand mixture right, or the powder monkey who ran the same dark ladder 100 times in one afternoon. But every ship that ruled the sea for 300 years depended entirely on their work. The empires get remembered. The men who built the guns rarely do. And that's worth remembering too.